is it working well? Are you having issues with it? Where does it work, and where are you pretty ill-equipped, I think, maybe at this point in time, too, to handle all that?
So the good news is that we're still in the early days of inference, and so the impact has not been as extreme. Now, the bad news is that obviously it's growing very, very quickly there. There are different mechanisms, and so we've talked a lot about bandwidth and the need for fiber and the need for spectrum and licensed spectrum to allow for more uplinks. There are also mechanisms that the operators can put inside of their networks to help sort of offload or diminish that traffic requirement, where they can be involved in the inferencing chain, serving tokens, maybe with intelligent direction of requests to different models, and maybe by hosting some of that inside their network. So I guess I would say we have multiple tools in our toolkit that we're working through, and I think they're all going to be required.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Watermeyer, what opportunities do you see for AI to improve emergency communications while making sure that our dispatchers remain at the center of the critical decisions that are going to be made when we have to have an emergency response? You talked about the wildfires in Nebraska, the bomb cyclone, the flooding, a lot of weather events that our emergency responders go through. So what do you see there?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question, because Nebraska does administer the underlying network of the 911, and we are really concerned. We're just at the edge of converting everything over to the next gen. AI is going to help in that in every single capacity. And even at the local level, it's going to help the training process. It's going to help the decision-making, and the tremendous amount of data that we are collecting when we switch to the next generation is going to be, AI is going to play a big part in that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Jefferson, I want to pick up where Chair Fisher was asking some questions about traffic. Everyone's highlighted today, networks are built for traffic predominantly to come down, not to go up with AI. I appreciate your response to Chair Fisher about existing technologies. Those are Band-Aids. Traffic patterns are going to change dramatically. They already have. And we're, in the United States, networks are still being built predominantly for download with very little up. In New Mexico, I pay, I won't say the company, for certain speeds, and I don't get them, which is also the problem in most parts of America. I think there's a bunch of crooks out there that should be held accountable, and there should be penalty on companies that are not delivering the speeds that they're promising people. I have a bill for that. I'm not introduced it yet, but it's coming. So for all the companies that are in the room today and that are listening, if you're stealing from people, I'm trying to be better with my language, stop it. And if you know that your networks are going down and you're taking from people, refund them. Give them money back. That's not my question to you. What are the implications if the United States continues to build out networks that predominantly are built for download as opposed to the requirements that we're seeing with the uptake with AI and other information with the flow going up?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Plain and simple, we have to change, right? We need to get more symmetrical in the network architecture, in the underlying infrastructure, in the fiber access, in the broadband, in wireless. And so that plain and simple is part of it. There are tools as we get into AI, where AI is going to make the network more efficient. We're developing agentic ops where the network can be more flexible and adaptable. But if it doesn't have that underlying infrastructure, that underlying backbone, then it doesn't work.
And Mr. Spalner, my colleague from Indiana was asking some questions pertaining to quantum. We also know that as a result of faster speeds today, that also increases the likelihood that deepfakes, people that are out there doing bad things, preying on our loved ones or ourselves, are able to do it at an increasingly pace. Quantum networks are also promising more cybersecurity, quantum security. As the United States builds out AI-driven network practices, protocols, we're looking at these other networks and policy. Should quantum networking be part of the toolkit that the United States is requiring to be built alongside it as a future consideration, or sorry, not as a future consideration, but as something that we should be pushing to be implemented now?
The answer is absolutely yes. I think that as we're envisioning the future network and the future needs that the network will support, including the types of traffic patterns, but also use cases that quantum will deliver, we need to begin that work now, not just in terms of the technology evolution that we're seeing in the labs and now transferring to commercial uses, because other countries, particularly China, is advancing those efforts as well, but also in terms of our thoughtful ways of developing legislative and regulatory frameworks that will prime the pump on allowing us to deliver the promise of quantum so that on the long term, we can do things like USF reform. We can do things like make sure that we are prioritizing all incentives possible, including permitting reform, to get more fiber and its symmetrical speeds, and particularly importantly, its low latency measured in the single digits of milliseconds that fiber networks will be able to deliver for our quantum future.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Everson, in one of your responses, I think to the chairman of the committee, you said something along the lines of people, users, may not be too concerned about how they're connected as long as they're connected to fast speeds. Should users be connected if they're connected? It's a loaded question. What I mean by that, Mr. Everson, is if people are not connected, I think people should care about that. There are people across America today that don't have access to the internet. Some because there's no connection, there's no offering, others because they can't afford it. And I appreciate what I believe I've heard from everyone about their support for USF reform. I would call it USF modernization. With all the work, with all the thoughtfulness that has got into this space. My question I have two closing questions here is, one, do you believe that USF modernization is needed and that the United States should adopt it and that Congress should act? Mr. Spalter?
Absolutely, yes. And we appreciate the work that you're doing and you're doing, Senator Fisher, in advancing that project.
Commissioner?
Certainly, and I have a good question, Senator Luan. I think about the network in the United States. It's like the interstate system built in 1956.
Yeah.
50,000 miles were built under cooperation, no private partnership necessarily. We need to be there, and I think USF really needs to be modernized, as you mentioned. And we're primed for it now. I think the communities and the citizens are ready, and they want to support it.
Appreciate that. Mr. Jefferson?
Yes, thank you, Senator, and thank you for the clarification. Yeah, I think USF has been an essential resource and something that we need to continue to look at and modernize for the AI era.
Appreciate that. Mr. Ramzanali?
Yes, and we need to continue to focus on its effects on low-income consumers and how they can be supported.
No, I appreciate that very much. Look, as we get to this place, with the concerns that have been shared around the policy and what the United States needs to do to ensure that there's guardrails and that there's rules and that there's guidance, that it's clear that there's liability, whether it's to the companies that are developing these models that have responsibility with these agents, or it's the end user who is then taking an open model and then using it for nefarious reasons. There needs to be liability somewhere so that people don't do that, whether it's criminal, it's civil, or it's both. I also want to ensure that everyone across the country has the ability to take advantage of the promise of what this technology is, and that means we have to be able to get connected. And so I hope that we can preserve the investment, that we can see USF modernization, that everyone involved, including the FCC, does good rather than bad, that we move things in a positive way as opposed to rolling rules back